And the JMU Dukes are dancing. They are in the NC2A college football playoff. Really cool. The 12 seed going to take on the 5 seed Oregon for local college football fans. But there is so much controversy and turmoil, as expected, with what happened. So to run through it, some of the stuff sorts itself out as the year goes on. Most of it does. Yep. Indiana plays Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. And by the way, Kurt Signetti, all he does is win. Google him.
Google him.
How amazing was that?
Beyond amazing.
For them to beat Ohio State and to go from, like everyone says, Maryland could never overtake Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten. They're just hoping to get to 8 wins. Indiana was in a way worse spot than Maryland.
They were worse than that.
And Signetti comes in there and in a couple of years has them number 1 in America going into the playoff with a bye and beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Then you got Georgia and Texas Tech and Oregon and Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin and some of the mainstays in the country this year. But the big debate at the back end of the field of 12, it's a 12-team playoff, was if the ACC chaos developed and came to fruition, would that open the door for Tulane to be the 11 seed and for JMU to be the 12 seed? I think when it originally was developed as this, rules for the playoff bracket, everyone always assumed it had to be the Power 5 conferences that got the auto bids. There are 5 automatic bids for winning your college conference. The difference is it doesn't have to be the Power 5. It's just the 5 highest ranked conference winners. And so in a year where the ACC is terrible and Virginia somehow plays Duke in the conference championship game, when Virginia lost and Duke was the conference champion, Virginia fell below JMU as the number 24 team in the college football playoff rankings. They're obviously well below Tulane. And so the 5 highest ranked automatic bids to conference champions get in. And Tulane and JMU got those automatic bids. Think NCAA tournament, where it doesn't matter if you're one of the 64 best teams in America. If you win the Danny Rouillet conference.
Yeah, if you are under 500 in the Horizon East League and get hot and hit a buzzer beater, you're going. You're dancing. It's beautiful.
And so in JMU's case, that was not what they were. They were really good all year long. They won 8 of their conference game by double-digit points. They haven't lost since week 2. They're on an 11-game winning streak. They're 12-1, but they win the Sun Belt, which overtook the ACC, and they got the bid. That led to immense turmoil, though, because a 2-loss Notre Dame is left out of the college football playoff. The debate for Notre Dame came down to at-large bids, basically. Them against Miami, BYU, those types of non-conference champions that are all fighting for what was 1 spot instead of 2 or 3. If Tulane, not a better team than Notre Dame, or JMU, not a better team than Notre Dame, didn't have to be in the college football playoffs, then you could have had Alabama in, who ended up getting an at-large bid. They were 9th. You could have had Miami in, who ended up getting an at-large bid. The last one, they were 10th. You could have had Notre Dame in. They would have been 11th. And maybe even, honestly, like as a 12th team, you probably could have had to Texas. Something like that, like a really, really good team that lost 3 games, including a loss to Florida. But instead, they had to include, based on the rules, JMU and Tulane. And that's the debate now, Danny, is should these schools be included if you're only having a 12-team playoff? Or when you expand this thing a little bit to 16 or so, should you save a space in the playoffs for the little guy? This is what Paul Feinbaum of ESPN had to say about this very subject.
Yeah, well, it's time to get rid of the G5 schools. And I know how they got in there. It was a compromise. But America does not want to see Tulane, nor do we want to see James Madison in the college football playoff. This is great in the NCAA basketball tournament, Greeny. There are 68 schools. There are only 12 here, and we don't need them around. And I'm not going to give you the, with all due respect, because I don't really care about Tulane or James Madison. They're both going to lose by 25 to 45 points. They'll be unwatchable games, and get them out of a playoff.
So that's Paul Feinbaum, who just wants to talk about how great the SEC is all day long on ESPN.
But yeah, guy's a millionaire by saying no one's going to beat Alabama.
He speaks for a lot of people like Ryan Clary when he says that. So here is the question. We can open up the phones on this at 800-636-1067. First of all, go Dukes, and congratulations to JMU. Is this the right collection of rules? Because for all the people, I'm texting with Clary leading up to this, and he's like, you can't put JMU in. I'm like, the rules say that the top 5 conference winners that are ranked get in. He's like, but you can't put them in. I'm like, there's a rule in place. You have to put them in. Well, you can't put them in. You hate the system or the rules. That's fine. But you can't change them midstream now. You can't say, well, the ACC sucked this year, so instead of having JMU get in representing the Sun Belt, we're not going to take the top 5 teams like we said we would that won their conference. That was always the rule. So the issue is now you're taking fewer of the at-large type teams that are really, really deserving in terms of being the best 12 in America. But do we like the idea, a la the NCAA tournament, that a JMU gets in to now possibly go be cannon fodder in Eugene, Oregon on December 2nd against Oregon? Do we like a Tulane-Ole Miss matchup? It feels a little more interesting because there's no Lane Kiffin and an 11-6 game on December 20th coming up. I think it's December 2nd. On December 20th, these 2 games are going to be played. Is this the way it should be? Or should they just take the top 12 teams that we think have the best chance to win the national championship in America?
So I'm much older than everybody that's here. And I lived in an era where the little guy was screwed. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. That was the policy. This was whatever the BCS. And before that, we just, the voters just voted and you had code number 1 sometimes and all sorts of weird crap would happen, despite teams having better resumes or otherwise. The idea that they would play football against each other decided has been the most wonderful gift to those of us that still care about this broken and messed up sport. So the refusal to include Boise State, the refusal to include University of Central Florida at various times. In fact, the TCU made it to the national championship game just before they adopted this field. Now they got woodshedded by an unbelievable Georgia juggernaut.
That was such a blowout.
They made it to the national championship game. They didn't lose their way in there. They didn't back their way in. They weren't just assigned it, etc. They should aspire to be more like the most perfect sporting event we have, which is the NCAA basketball tournament. It's the best thing we have. We have mastered it. We kick everybody's ass around the world. They're all jealous of it. It's incredible. So including the little guy is perfect. The objections shouldn't be over somebody that did everything they possibly could have in a James Madison or a Tulane. The objection should be you've got Miami well behind Notre Dame for months. All of a sudden, they jump them in the final rankings. Notre Dame was ahead of Alabama, who had a middling performance against Auburn, who's 5-7. Alabama gets woodshedded by Georgia in their conference title game, jumps over Notre Dame, and they're out. That should be where the objection is. Less so than having James Madison in the field, less so than having Tulane in the field. The little guy should absolutely be a thing to try to level this stupid uneven playing field that's only getting more uneven because of NIL and the amount of money that these major mega programs can pour in. Hundreds of millions where the little guy can't do that. It should be a great success story. That's more fun, frankly, than an overrated, bloated Notre Dame team that's always overhyped. This group is actually pretty good, by the way. And I know they made it to the national title game not too long ago. But typically, they're ranked 8th in the country. They lose to Pitt and drop another game like Stanford somewhere along the way. Or Northern Illinois gets them, but they still get a major bowl on NBC time. I've had enough of that. I want to see James Madison. So with all due respect to Captain Fun Sponge, Mr. Feinbaum, good afternoon, Mr. Feinbaum. Wrong. I do want to see that. The country wants to see that. That's special. I know the fans in the SEC get mad. They think everybody that has an SEC schedule should automatically go. It's not your birthright. Like, to me, room for the little guy is what makes amateur, it's still amateur to a degree, sports special. So, yeah, they absolutely belong. The flipping and inconsistent rhetoric, though, that's upsetting.
Yeah, so I think I've changed my mind on this a little bit over the years. I was more and have been, give me the best playoff games. I don't care who's in or who isn't. Give me, at the end of the year, who are the 12 best odds teams to win a national championship. Put them in the 12-team playoff, and let's have the best playoff possible. But why should you be so exclusionary? At the beginning of the year, why should all the other conferences other than the big boys not have any chance to win a national championship?
That's the point.
It's not fair. It's not correct. So I actually do like the automatic bids. I think it's reasonable. I would expect,
because otherwise they'd be colluded against.
Yes.
Which has happened my whole life.
Happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that I think this year, and there's always going to be this situation, it was super complicated because you mentioned Alabama. Let me go there for a second. I think you had to put Alabama in, because if you didn't put Alabama in, conference championship games are over as we know them. That's not a world I want to live in. In other words, Alabama accepts and goes and plays in the SEC title game. Teams that don't play in a conference championship game, that just stop their season with 2 losses, don't get to go play in the Big Ten, the SEC title game, whatever, just sit back and watch Alabama try to win a championship. And now you penalize them for playing one of the best teams in America, Georgia, in a conference championship game and they get handled and it's a third loss and you go, see, now you don't get in. Why would anyone ever go play in an SEC title game again? If I'm going to get in by not playing in it with 2 losses, that's not the spirit of college football or what we should be doing. So you had to include Alabama, or else literally you're kissing conference championships and the power conferences goodbye forever. So I think that's a non-starter. Alabama gets in. Now, you could also say, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, BYU played in a conference championship game. It was held against them.
Yeah.
Now, that's a little bit hypocritical.
Yeah, they got woodshedded by Texas Tech, who's real good.
I think Texas Tech beat them a little more handily, and I also just don't think, if we're being honest, I know everyone wants to make that the same argument, like analogous. BYU and Alabama are not the same. Alabama's a better football team. I think if they were favored,
I think so too.
Played on a neutral site, Alabama would be like an 8-point favorite or something.
Yeah, I think so too.
But if you want to say it was held against BYU, you're right. But I think particularly in the SEC with a team like Alabama, you cannot exclude them after they lose to Georgia, because that would have been the final SEC championship game we've seen. I think that's bad for college football. And as a fan, it's not what I want. The Notre Dame-Miami thing's really interesting too. Notre Dame played Miami earlier this year, and they lost head-to-head.
Yes, they did.
Now, why was Miami behind them in the rankings after that for so long, and then got leapt at the end when Notre Dame was ahead of them, and then Miami leaps them at the the very end to get in? I can't answer that. That you're right. I would be mad about that if I'm a Notre Dame fan. But if I'm debating these two teams with almost identical resumes, same record, very similar, and I won head-to-head over this team, you're going to let them in and me out? I think
it's not crazy.
When it came down to those two, it's a tie. It's not like anybody head-to-head ever gets in. It's not like if Duke had beaten my Notre Dame, they would have gotten in over them. This was basically a tiebreaker where they literally played head-to-head, and Miami beat Notre Dame. So I think in that case, you had to put Alabama in, because you can't lose the SEC title game forever, or conference championship games. You had to put Miami in over Notre Dame because of the head-to-head in what was a tiebreaker. So I don't know what else they could have really done. I actually think, as crazy as it sounds, they actually got this right, even though someone got screwed.
So my response to Alabama is, it wasn't necessarily, to me, what it should have been is, they needed to win in the SEC championship game or have a good showing to secure their place because of their losses and their shaky resume.
But that's not where they were in the rankings. That's not how it would have been viewed, which is still damaging to it was viewed going into the week. They are a lock to be in unless they lose, and the committee holds that against them.
Which I thought was an incorrect assessment. I guess that's kind of my point. Like, again, I have no problem on a blind taste test challenge putting Miami ahead of Notre Dame. It's the fact that they weren't, and nothing changed.
That part
Miami didn't play in their league championship.
Yep.
Notre Dame's just sitting there minding their business as much of a lock as anybody. And all of a sudden, they dropped down a whole bunch of spots, despite Alabama barely eking out a win over Auburn, who's terrible, and then losing dominated against Georgia, and now Notre Dame's outside looking in.
The only thing I can think about this, and we'll take calls on this next, 800-636-1067, is that throughout the season, they were not pitting those two head-to-head directly. It was just, we're ranking everyone blind resume, whatever. And then at the end, it came down to one of these two teams get in, Miami or Notre Dame. And they had Miami ranked, one spot behind Notre Dame or whatever. And they go, well, wait a second. Are we really going to put, it's these two teams who are basically tied.
Yep.
And they played head-to-head and Miami beat them. That ends the conversation.
Had they been tied all season long and there's a half spot between them or whatever, it'd make more sense to me. But it's the number of spots that Miami had to jump.
I can't explain that one. I'm not telling you it all makes sense. But I will tell you that I think they got it right. I think based on the system in place. Now, if you want to change the system, and that's the question, should JMU be able to get a seat at the table out of the Sun Belt? Because everyone thinks they're going to lose to Oregon by 30 points. Should Tulane be able to get in representing their conference in a year like this?